Hello and welcome from Buenos Aires, Argentina, to this episode of Crossing Borders with Nathan Lustig, where Nate has conversations with entrepreneurs doing business across borders and the people who support them, with a focus on those that have some connection to Latin America. My name is Josefina Dominguez, and I'm an editor for Latinlist, a proud sponsor of the Crossing Borders podcast. Sign up for our weekly updates on latinlist.com to get a summary of the week's biggest headlines in Latin American tech news. Nate's guest today is Florence Frech, co-founder of Leal, a customer engagement platform that helps B2C companies truly understand who their customers are through loyalty programs. They talk about why customer engagement is a challenge in Latin America, what it was like growing up in El Salvador and what its ecosystem has to offer. And they also talk about Florence's experience studying in the US and working in banking before taking the leap into the entrepreneurial world and starting a company in Colombia. And finally, Florence gives great advice on starting a company and raising money as a seed-stage startup in Latin America. We hope you enjoy this conversation with Florence Frech.
Hey, Florence, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for being willing to do it.
Hi, Nathan. Thank you so much for having me.
No, I'm glad to do it. So where are you in the world today?
I'm in Bogota, Colombia.
And tell me a little bit about what you're working on.
So to tell you a little bit about the last 5 years, I co-founded Leal. It's a customer engagement platform that helps B2C companies, primarily retailers, truly understand who their customers are. So my co-founder and I have a background on advising the retail industry, and something that caught our eye very, very early on was that companies can spend a lot of money on marketing, but that marketing isn't necessarily measurable and effective. So Leal was born out of the conviction that we wanted to really help companies truly understand who their customers are, what they buy, what they're saying about their brands, and how to make their marketing spend much more efficient. In terms of interesting statistics, I would say that I think things that I've learned along the way in the last 5 years that have motivated me to move forward with this project include the fact that 60% of new customers don't come back to any retail store after their first visit. Half of credit card consumers don't use after 1 month in Latin America. So half of the people that get credit cards have them completely inactive in Latin America. And lastly, CPG companies see their most loyal customers churn. 46% of the most loyal customers churn every year. So really, if you think about it, customer engagement is a huge problem in the region in Latin America, because we really live in a world where people are very easy to reach, but very hard to engage.
And what are some of the challenges that you see that are unique to LATAM? Why is it so hard to keep customers happy and keep them coming back compared to maybe the US or European market, where some of the listeners who don't know LATAM well might be listening?
Well, I think there's a couple of reasons, but I'm going to go with what I think is the main one. I think that retailers in past 10 years haven't really focused on data to truly understand their consumers. So I think that they've stayed with massive campaigns, massive marketing, and really the consumer doesn't want to be engaged or doesn't want to open an email about, I as a woman don't want to open an email about a barber shop, like, why am I getting this? And I think that retailers in LATAM have failed at really understanding what their consumers' needs are, or even not even understanding, prioritizing that, I would say. So I think that retailers haven't really focused on analytics and the wealth of information that data can bring them about their consumers. And I think that has separated the region or set the region apart. We're a couple of years behind other markets such as the US in customer retention.
Yeah, I think especially in many of the countries in LATAM where there's less competition, the big retail brands just haven't had to fight as much for consumers until the last kind of, like you said, 5 to 10 years. I think it's definitely one of the highlights of why LATAM is so different.
Yeah, and that for us created the opportunity to launch Leal, which, as I said, is a customer engagement platform. We work primarily with retailers in which we provide them the software that they need to create a loyalty program, a sort of closed loop loyalty program via our platform that enables them to capture all the information from their consumers using loyalty rewards. And so we launched 4 years ago. To date, we have over 750 participating retailers in our platform. And we have a user base of 2 million users, out of which most of them pre-quarantine, of course, were 25% of them were monthly active. And so what we've seen is that it's a win-win situation for both the retailer and the user, because the retailer leverages the loyalty program and the information that they gather from the loyalty program to actually get to know their consumers and make more targeted offers. And the user starts saving using those loyalty rewards, right? So if you have all of your loyalty programs in a single app, you don't have to worry about carrying a lot of punch cards or downloading different apps and having multiple registrations for different loyalty programs. You have everything in Leal, and you have visibility of the points that you've earned at every single merchant, and you have visibility of the rewards that each merchant can give you. So thankfully, we found very good product market fit in the last 4 years, and we've been growing exponentially, I would say. So that makes me very happy.
As it should. So, well, let's jump into your background a little bit, and then we'll go back into digging deeper into Leal. Where are you from originally?
I'm from El Salvador, born and raised in El Salvador, Central America.
I think you're the first person from El Salvador on the podcast. So can you give us a little bit of background on what it's like growing up in El Salvador and kind of what the entrepreneurial ecosystem is like, if there is?
Absolutely. So El Salvador is a very small country in Central America. It's 21,000 square meters. Beautiful country where there's very lovely, hardworking people. That's one thing that I love about my country. Beautiful beaches. If you ever have the chance to go down there and do some surfing, it's a fantastic place to do some surfing. You have a lot of places to visit. Growing up in El Salvador was amazing. I think very family oriented, very, small. San Salvador is a small city, so it's very family focused, value focused. So I really loved growing up there. And my entire family's there, so I go back very often. In terms of the entrepreneurial ecosystem, I think that I personally moved to Bogota right as it was starting to take off. But I think from what I've seen from going back, it's gathered traction with a couple of different apps, in particular Ugo app, which is a delivery startup that's done a terrific job at bringing together a lot of merchants to do delivery, just like any Rappi or Uber Eats have done here in the rest of Latin America. I think the biggest challenge that El Salvador as a country has in developing its entrepreneurial ecosystem is the market, right? Because you have a relatively small market. So you can't really think of the consumer as a Salvadoran consumer. You really have to think of the consumer as a Central American consumer and start thinking about whatever you're going to take to market as something that you can take to market in Guatemala, in Honduras, in Nicaragua, in Costa Rica. And you have to think about the Central American consumer as one huge market, and that provides a great opportunity. For us at Leal, that's how we've approached it. We launched Leal in Bogota, in Colombia, 4 years ago. And at the beginning of 2019, we launched our international expansion, and it was in El Salvador. And it's been fantastic.
Did you always know that you wanted to be an entrepreneur, or was it something that came up in your business career?
I absolutely did not know I wanted to become an entrepreneur. So it's funny because I come from a family of entrepreneurs. My parents started their company 45 years ago, and to this day, they still work together and they still run their company together. And I think that's something I grew up with, having the difficult conversations in the dinner table with, 4 kids. And it was just the same thing. Family and business is just one whole thing. I didn't know that I wanted to become an entrepreneur. I left El Salvador when I was 18 and moved to the US. I did my undergrad in the US. I focused on finance. So I've always been very numbers driven. And graduating from undergrad, I chose to work in banking for 5 years. So I did 3 years in the States and 2 years back in El Salvador. And I really liked, while I was in banking, I really liked the certainty that numbers bring you. I sort of always, I always liked that. And sort of I wanted to do something different when I turned 27 and went back to the States for my MBA. And during my MBA, I took a couple of different classes. Obviously, I took the finance path because it was just what I was comfortable with. But I remember one of my previous managers in banking, when I told him I was doing an MBA, he said, no, don't do finance. Do something that makes you uncomfortable because you're good at finance and you know that. And do something that makes you uncomfortable and that you're gonna learn something different. So that's when in one of my finance classes, I met my current co-founder, who's Colombian, and actually Leal is his second company. So he went to his MBA thinking already about, starting a second company. And in a very informal conversation, we started talking about what we wanted to do after Kellogg. And he said, well, why don't you join me in, participating in this Latin American startup competition? And I said, well, that's something that I've never considered otherwise. And this Latin American startup competition was with a completely different idea than Leal. And we got completely destroyed in the competition by the judges. And, it made me feel like I completely failed at the idea, and I was terrible by not knowing everything they asked. And it was one of those experiences where I felt really uncomfortable. And by the end of it, we spent a month preparing for that competition. I said, I kind of like this. I kind of like being challenged with something different. I don't want to be an entrepreneur in an industry that I don't know anything about. Our initial idea was in the medical industry. And I remember walking out of the competition saying, I want to do this. I just don't want to work in an industry that I don't know anything about. And that's when it sort of clicked for me. And we were both in advising retail before. And I come from, before our MBAs, and I come from a family that has been in retail for over 100 years in Central America. So I know a thing or two about retail. I've never worked in a family business, but like I said, dinner conversations teach you a lot when you're young. And so, that's how we, started looking at loyalty programs, and we figured that there was a huge need for a platform that would provide data analytics in the retailers that we had been previously working with. That there was a huge opportunity to bring this to Latin America. And so, to answer your original question, if I knew that I wanted to be an entrepreneur, the answer is no. But I was really open to trying things that would make me uncomfortable and hence would make me grow in my career. And I don't regret that.
And what did your friends and family say when you gave up the really nice career in conservative traditional banking to go out on your own and start something new?
In Colombia, don't forget that part.
Also in Colombia.
They all said I was crazy. They all said that I was crazy for, actually, they probably said that I was crazy, but they didn't think that it would stick. I think that's what they thought. I think, you just go do this for 3 months and then you'll be back. And a banking job will be here waiting for you. Or, you could always turn whatever story you're going to go have into a learning experience. I think the one thing that worried my family and friends, at least in El Salvador, was that I was moving to Colombia. I don't think any of them were very familiar with the Colombian entrepreneurial ecosystem. I think they were worried that I had only met my co-founder for 2 years during our MBA. And, they were like, why are you doing this? Like, why are you taking that risk? Because I've never taken very risky decisions before this in my life. And I sort of approached it as a life experience. And I said, I want to do something different, and I want to learn. And if this goes well, then it'll be great. And if this doesn't, then it'll be a great learning experience. So I didn't really see the downside. And I think that even though it was shocking for them at first that I made this decision, I think that eventually they saw that I was just so excited about it that they were completely supportive.
So you do the entrepreneurial kind of competition in Latin America. You don't get the greatest feedback, but you get challenged, and you decide you don't want to do an industry you don't know and you do want to do one that you do know, what was the 0 to 1 or the inflection point from knowing that you want to do something about retail to getting this business off the ground?
Falling in love with a problem, I would say. So we weren't going back to the retail industry. Back when I was at Kellogg, it was 2013 to 2015. And I think the Groupon wave was sort of dying down, and the loyalty wave was sort of starting. And I think the moment where it clicked was when my co-founder and I said, well, the world of discounts is not, it's not going to be the next big thing, especially not in Latin America. The world of data and getting data from your consumers and making data-driven decisions is definitely something that's starting to take hold. There's nothing like this in Latin. And that's when we started figuring out if there was a problem to solve in that industry. And so we researched, I want to say we spent probably 3 months before the end of our first year at school, really trying to understand everything that was out there that was customer engagement, related to customer engagement. And then during the summer, between the first and the second year, we didn't do an internship. We came to Bogota to actually figure out if there was a need for something like this. And we talked to over 200 retailers, and we said, well, are you willing to pay for something like this? Is this something that you would develop yourselves? Is this something that you need to know about your consumers? And we just realized that the opportunity was 3 times or 10 times as big as we had imagined it. Just because there was still the mentality in LATAM that they wouldn't do this in-house, and that they wouldn't, I remember one of our very early conversations, it was with one large fried chicken chain. And they said, well, I know how to sell fried chicken. I don't know who to sell it to. That's something I'm willing to pay you for. And I'm like, yeah, that's fantastic. We have a deal. And that's when I think everything sort of started clicking. And it was, I think the early lesson from deciding to become an entrepreneur in an industry where I had some knowledge, it really made us stronger, because I think that it gave us that footing in the door, to get in the door with those retailers, that we knew something about their business, about their industry from before.
It's really an interesting, and generally the way that the most successful entrepreneurs that we've invested in and the stories that have been shared have done it, of going through and actually doing the hard work of beating down the doors to be able to talk to lots and lots of the first customers or potential customers. How did you decide to do it that way, rather than, say, some entrepreneurs would go out and say, I'm going to go raise a bunch of money and build my product and then talk to my customers?
I think it was a couple of reasons that don't necessarily business driven, but now that I think about it, it made total sense. I think so my co-founder and I were very different. He's always looking at the forest. He's always looking at the big picture, and I'm always looking at the trees. And I think that's what's made for a great partnership. And at that moment, I think when we were here in Bogota for the first time, I wasn't sure that I wanted to do this. And I think he realized that I sort of needed that external validation in order to commit to this before turning down my banking career. And I think having those over 200 conversations just got me really, really excited about trying to solve a problem. But as I said, it was really focusing on understanding the problem. So I think that I am a person that I'm very structured. I like to go from A to B, from B to Z, from C to D, it's very unlike a traditional entrepreneur. But I think that having my co-founder have the complete opposite skill set and, forced me for those 2 months to really look at the forest then, and really look, is there a potential opportunity? And even though I was really excited to jump into action, we decided that for those 2 months, we were going to do nothing but talk to retailers and truly understand the problem. So we didn't hire developers. We didn't raise money. We didn't prototype. We didn't build an MVP. We said there's going to be enough time after Kellogg to do that. Let's really make sure that if we're going to commit our careers to do this, it's because we truly understand the problem. And I am very thankful that, he put that on the table very early on.
So let's talk a little bit about building the product. After you've found that there's a need that needs to be filled here, how did you decide what features to build, and what did you build at the beginning?
A PDF We bootstrapped for the first year and a half. And so we didn't jump development immediately. So we built the PDF early during our second year at Kellogg, and we started validating that with the customers that we had spoken to over the summer when we were here, the potential customers, the retailers that we had spoken to. And we said, would you like to see something like this? Interactively, of course, but imagine that this has links, and imagine that you can send an email from this, and imagine that you can see Nathan's profile, from his age to his phone number to his consumer spending habits. And I think that sort of shaped the initial product. And then at the end of our second year at Kellogg, we won a Kellogg, like a Northwestern University venture competition or something from our category. We won our category, and that gave us enough money to hire a company in the US that was specialized in building prototypes. And so they were specialized in building out the functional document on what you needed to do, because our platform might seem like it's just a dashboard and an app, but there's so much more behind that, right? In order to process all this data, there's so much more behind it that we really wanted to get the foundation right. So we spent, I think it was $10,000 or $15,000 that we got from that competition in, building that out with this company in Chicago. And then with that in hand, we came to Colombia, interviewed over 15 software houses on how they would build this and really how they would structure this product until we find the one that we wanted to work with. And eventually we ended up bringing an internal CTO and have our a completely full stacked development team in-house. But at the beginning, when we didn't have any money, it was way cheaper to do it with a software house. And that's when we decided to outsource the development of the software, while my co-founder and I stayed primarily focusing on sales.
Let's talk about use cases for retailers. What kind of data do you gather, and what would be kind of some specific use cases that retailers would use your product for?
So we gather, because we've developed technology that allows us to integrate into the retailer's point of sale system, we're able to gather all the data down to the SKU level. So when Nathan goes into the app and registers into Leal, they just have to register once. Nathan just has to register once in order to access, 700 brands loyalty programs. But in that registration process, you have to give us, name, last name, date of birth, gender, email, ID number, and phone number. So we get on your entire demographic profile. And that's on the user side. On the merchant side, because of that integration, every time you earn points at Pizza Hut, for instance, you actually give Pizza Hut, at the moment you pay, you give Pizza Hut your national ID number, which in Colombia is a public number. And via that ID, we're able to tie that invoice down to the SKU level to your profile. We turn that around and we give Pizza Hut a dashboard where they can see who Nathan is with all his demographic information, as well as all of his consumer habits. We can see if Nathan only likes cheese pizza or if he likes pepperoni pizza better. What is his average spend? How often does he come? Does he buy only when it's discounted, when it's discounted price, or if he buys full price? We're able to do all of that segmentation. Is he in the top 10% of customers? Is he in the bottom percent? Did he have a bad experience? Did he rate poorly this location and prefers the other location? And Pizza Hut from there can make informed decisions. And if they know that you pay full price for the cheese pizza, maybe leave you out of the promotion for cheese pizzas. Or if they know that you only buy them on discount, they can target that they can use targeted information to make better decisions. And it's actionable, right? That's what most retailers value the most. The fact that they can see, I can select based on different criteria that can be demographic or consumer based. They can select who to send a specific promotion to. And via our platform, they send that promotion. So we're fully integrated into an email server and an SMS server. And they can send that promotion. And whoever comes, we also allow the retailer to see conversion rates. So they see what's working and what's not.
After bootstrapping for a year and a half, talk a little bit about the decision to raise money and how you've been able to raise from then till now.
Sure. That was tough because I think that 2015, the entrepreneurial ecosystem in Colombia wasn't what it is today. I think we tried having initial conversations before launching the product, but then Camilo and I decided that it would be much better if we could show some traction. And so we raised a seed round. No, we raised a family and friends, family and fools round in 6 months after we launched. And it was a convertible note. And then that gave us enough gas for the next year in which we, I want to say, quadrupled sales and actually got the traction that we wanted. From there, we raised a seed round, and so we raised our friends, family, and fools December 2016, seed round December 2017, and Series A December 2018.
What advice would you give to other founders who are either just thinking about going from maybe a stable job into starting a company, about fundraising, and then also maybe other entrepreneurs in Colombia or the region that are trying to raise? What made you be able to raise, or what tips would you give to them?
I think that seed round investors in Latin America have way higher expectations because they still think it's way more risky, and probably you think the same thing. And it's true, right? Investing in Latin America at a seed stage is probably more risky than investing in the US at a seed stage. So I think that in order to get to fundraise and to get money, to get investment at that stage, you have to have some traction. I think that at that point, if you've shown that your money's where your mouth is, and you've quit your job, you've dedicated X amount of time to this, you found customers that are willing to pay for your product, you have high usability rates, you have an interesting market, then what you'll expect is traction. And what they'll expect is definitely some traction. What I would say to entrepreneurs that are trying to fundraise in Colombia is that I think, so two things. The first thing would be beware of the type of investor that really doesn't understand that the interests of the investor and the interests of the entrepreneur have to be aligned from the start. I think that there's still Latin America in general still has a lot of investors that are trying to take advantage from entrepreneurs, and having those types of investors early on can totally damage your cap table moving forward. So I would say don't accept any money at any terms. I think that you have to be very picky because this is almost like a marriage, right? If they're invested in your company, you'll have to see them until you exit or they exit. And it's a two-way street. They're putting the money, but you're also taking it. So you're engaging in a level of commitment that you should not take lightly. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is you always need to have a vision for the region and for the world. Don't stay focused in Colombia, because I think that Colombia can have fantastic investors. Most of my investors are Colombian, but I think that you have to start thinking about talking to investors outside. You have to start thinking about bringing in skill sets and experience from your investors that has a world view. Right now I'm looking for investors that would sit on my board that would help me scale the company. How do I take Leal international? How do I go into Mexico? How do I go into Peru? How do I go into Chile? And I value that skill set. So I think that you have to remember that it's definitely a two-way street, and you have to have a global view of what they bring to the table and what you bring to the table.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice, especially on the investor side. It is a long-term relationship. It's an average of 7 to 10 years from a really early stage. So you got to really make sure that you really have that fit with them, because it is like a marriage. It's really hard to even do a divorce in an early stage startup. It's even harder to get out.
Agree.
Do you have any books, blogs, podcasts, or documentaries you'd like to recommend to people, whether about startups or just life in general?
For the last year, I've become a fan of biographies. I didn't used to think of I love to read. It's one of my passions. And I think that you can learn so much about other people's, we're not going to live long enough to make all the mistakes ourselves. So I think I enjoy reading biographies because they teach me so much about, what, other people have learned in their endeavors, that I find it so interesting. One book that I really enjoyed and that I recommend to entrepreneurs, especially entrepreneurs that are fundraising, was Shoe Dog. Shoe Dog is the story of the founder of Nike. And I love that book just because I could identify with it so much. I think it's a fantastic story, but the founder runs out of money every 3 chapters. And he is so resourceful, and it's really a great, everybody's telling him he can't do it. The banks are denying credit. Investors aren't coming through. And somehow he figures out how to get money. And then 3 chapters later, he's out of money again. And somehow he figures it out. And then 3 chapters later, he's out of money again. And I feel like that's the life of the entrepreneur. You're always fundraising. You're always thinking ahead about the next step. And it's a really good book to read. It's just a book I enjoyed a lot. I'm a huge fan of biographies, I would say.
Yeah, Shoe Dog has been a favorite of many of the guests, and I second your biography recommendation. I've been same thing on a biography kick over the last couple of years, going through. You can learn so much about the kind of distilled wisdom of an amazing person's life by reading their biography.
I completely agree.
So if you could go back to when you started Leal, knowing everything you know today, what advice would you give yourself? I
would ask myself, even though that I know that this would be really hard, and it still is today, it's one of the things that I struggle the most with, is I would advise myself to take a step back and look at the forest more often, and before jumping into action. So I'm a person that I like to fix things very quickly. And, if I understand, half of the problem or 2/3 of the problem, usually I want to start planning the solution immediately. I want to start planning the solution. And I think one of the things that I would tell myself in 2015 is you need to understand the problem in much more depth before you start thinking about a solution, because otherwise it's going to be a very superficial solution. And I think that really understanding, and this comes in not only for an entrepreneur, and not only in terms of starting a company, but I think that now that I'm running a company, I sometimes I tell myself, stop, really understand the root of the problem instead of jumping into a solution. And I think that I used to do that a lot more at the beginning than I do now. I've learned a lot, but that's probably what I would tell myself.
What's next over the next couple of years for Leal?
Oh, that's such an exciting question. A couple of things. I think one of the things that is immediately next, or at least was immediately next before the pandemic, was our international expansion. So 2020 was the year we were going to Mexico, was the year we were going to South America. It was, it makes me very excited to bring a product like this to a place like Mexico, because it's such an opportunity because of the market there. I think it makes me very excited that in the last 4 years, we've truly found a product market fit that is replicable, and that we're scaling a company that is sustainable. Actually, one of the things that I think grounded us a lot, me and my partner from the beginning, was that we didn't want to scale a company at any cost. We didn't just want to scale a company that was going to be, unprofitable forever. We just didn't share that mentality. And so it was very important for us to scale in a very organized manner. And because we have a network of, now it is 2 million users and 750 brands, when you're scaling a two-sided market, I think that it's very important to think about, you can't really stop growth on both markets. You have to keep feeding one market and feeding the other one in order to keep everybody interesting. And that's hard to do and capital intensive. So I'm really glad that we focused on Colombia first, Central America second, and now for the next 2 years or 3 years, do the same thing in Mexico, and probably 1 or 2 more countries in South America. So I think that's one of the things that I'm most excited about. The other thing that I'm really excited about is that we recently launched our digital currency, which is not a cryptocurrency. It's a digital currency that allows you to pay for different products and services at any of our 750 merchants. And you get this digital currency from, credit card reward points that you don't use from your bank and that you want to transfer into Leal coins. And you get them from many different merchants that instead of wanting you to spend those points internally, they want you to spend those points in, a trip with your friends, or a beer with your friends, or, the coffee that you buy every day. So, having this digital asset just makes me really excited to go into the fintech world. And, we launched it exactly, 4 or 5 months before the pandemic hit, and we're seeing amazing numbers. So I'm really excited to bring that back on board after, the economy starts ramping up again.
Thanks for sharing your story. It was really, really great. And it's going to be fun to watch you continue to execute as you build the business. Thanks again for doing it.
Thank you for having me, Nathan.
Thanks again for listening to this episode of Crossing Borders with our guest, Florence Frech. And thank you to Angel Andreca for producing this podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please share with a friend and give us a rating on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts. It's the best way to share what's going on in Latin America's ecosystem.